let's talk about Lisk. So my name is Max Kodek. I'm the CEO and co-founder of the Lisk Foundation. The Lisk project is all about enabling developers to build their own blockchain applications in JavaScript. And for that, we have developed a whole ecosystem of applications which facilitates that. Let me give you today an update about the Lisk Foundation, our community and network and research efforts, and about our user interfaces and the SDK, which will facilitate exactly that. After me, Rachel will join the stage and give you a deep dive into the Alpha SDK, which will, for real developers, enable them to build blockchain applications. So, the Lisk Foundation was established in 2016 in Switzerland. It's a non-profit entity, and in the last months, we have joined various associations and federations, and we are a founding partner of INATBA, which drives the blockchain efforts forward in the European Union. And we are consisting of a board and a team. Board members are next to myself and Oliver Beddoes, who is a founder of Lisk as well, Benedict Schubli, with multiple years of blockchain experience in law. And in the team is Guido Schmitz-Krummacher, acting as a managing director, who has tremendous experience in managing crypto foundations in the recent years. Next to that, Marcin and Camelia are supporting us on the legal and accounting side. But that's not all. We have a full team in Berlin under Lightcurve with over 50 employees working full-time and on-site on the Lisk project. And we're always looking for more people. So if you want to apply, just go to lightcurve.io/careers. We're always looking for expanding our team. But a blockchain project is not only about the team, right? It's also about the community. And because blockchain is about decentralization, we want to be everywhere in the world. And for that, we have established an effort called Lisk Center with various co-working spaces and locations all around the world to gather fellow Lisk enthusiasts and blockchain enthusiasts together. We have one in Xiamen, China, in Tokyo, Japan, and in Utrecht, Netherlands. And it's always worth to just come and speak to amazing people in the space to just exchange ideas. We think, even though decentralization is important, it's always best to work side by side, face to face. That just proves to be much more efficient in daily practices, especially if we're talking about something as complicated as blockchain technology. The Lisk Network, it's always being confused. We're not a fork of Ethereum, we're not a fork of Bitcoin, we're based on our own code. We have our own native currency, LiskHQ, which is not an ERC20 token. It's secured by 101 delegates. It's based on delegate proof of stake. And it's been running now since over 3 years. It's always since the beginning 100% open source developed. It's completely managed on GitHub publicly for everyone to take a look at. We have a fully automated QA suite so that everyone can always confirm that our latest releases are running stable and secure. Because for us, we have this internal motto, quality over speed. And that proved to be the right approach because we had not a single security breach since launch and are consistently ranked as one of the highest quality projects by CryptoMiso or DAPL rating or the Chinese government. But blockchain technology is not just a regular software project, right? It's quite cryptographic heavily. You need to conduct a lot of research. And that's why we have established something called the Lisk Improvement Proposal System, similar to the Bitcoin Improvement Proposal System, in which everyone in the entire world can contribute their ideas on how to grow and progress the Lisk network and the Lisk protocol. We have internally 4 PhD scientists working full-time on that, and obviously the most efforts are being inserted by them. But we want to have an open discussion with everyone in the world to actively manage and progress the Lisk platform. For that, we have established research.lisk.io, where we upload these proposals and people can have an active discussion about them. And as soon as the discussion dries up and deemed finalized and people have nothing to contribute anymore and the Lisk improvement proposal seems to be ready, we are merging it into our GitHub repository so that it's sitting there waiting to be implemented into our network and protocol. Some of them are quite unique. For example, just recently we have wrote a paper about a lightweight BFT consensus algorithm, which will add block finality to our blockchain. That means after a certain amount of time, you can be 100% sure that the transaction is final and cannot be reversed, which is in a future with many blockchains and atomic swaps and interoperability extremely important. But at Lisk, we're taking somewhat this AOL approach because we think that early technologies are always extremely complicated, and that's why you need this whole horizontal scope of tools and applications which can provide you an easy access into the ecosystem. That's why we are developing our own desktop and mobile wallets. LiskHub is our desktop wallet, which provides you with a full feature spectrum of what the Lisk Network has to offer. And Lisk Mobile is the more lightweight version of that. We have just recently added Bitcoin support to the mobile wallet as well, because we think that the blockchain industry is not just Lisk, it's many projects, and we want to give back as much as possible. So that's why we think that it's important to bring this accessibility also to the Bitcoin world and in the future to other currencies. The same will happen on LiskHub. And the next logical step then, of course, will be also an easy inter-exchange of these currencies right in the application itself. But now let's come to the most important thing, our Lisk SDK, which will facilitate blockchain application developers to develop their own blockchains easily accessible and very fast. So in the last 3 years in which we are developing Lisk, we made tremendous effort in bringing it to the state where we can say we are launching an Alpha SDK. And in all this time, we had 19,000 commits on GitHub by over 60 plus contributors and around 200 releases. So all this effort has led to this one moment where we can say that we are on the verge of releasing our Alpha SDK, which will facilitate developers finally to develop their own blockchain in JavaScript. And I'm very happy to welcome Rachel to the stage, which will give you a walkthrough to that. Thanks.
Hi, can you hear me? My name's Rachel. I'm a tech evangelist here at Lisk. It's really exciting for me to be back at Consensus a year after I met the Lisk team first here. And also even more exciting that we're kind of approaching our Alpha SDK launch. As Max says, this has been a huge milestone in our development. It's our first SDK offering, and it's something that developers will be able to get their hands on and really start digging around in the code. Today, I'm going to show you a little bit of what that looks like. So I do apologize to those of you who aren't developers, but there is going to be some code on screen. But first, before I do that, what can you do with our SDK? I'm going to be talking you through these 3 steps, these 3 things that you can do. So you can bootstrap your own blockchain. That's going to be a blockchain that kind of ships with all the native functionality, all the functionality native to the Lisk main chain. So there'll be transactions to send tokens, transactions to register delegates, etc., etc. And it's also going to be one that ships with our new modular architecture. This is something we spent the last 3 to 4 months implementing, and it's a really important step for our development. One, it makes our life easier because we can develop internally in a much more incremental and modular way. But it also means for developers who are working with us, there's going to be minimal disruption to your experience of using the SDK as we add improvements throughout the roadmap, and there's a lot of them coming. And finally, it also means as third-party or community developers, you can actually kind of build your own module that fits right into this architecture. And this is something we've actually already seen some community members start doing already. We've got a community member who's building their own Genesis creation block. So we're really looking forward to see the kind of modules that get written and kind of sit inside the architecture there. The next thing is there's going to be quite a number of attributes that you can configure. This starts with block time, block reward, and block size. I'm going to show you a little peek of what changing block time will look like today. But obviously, as we improve our SDK, we're going to be adding to these configurables. So you're going to see a lot more coming to that selection there. And then finally, you can also create your own custom transactions. So if you want to do something different that's not in Lisk main chain, you want to create your own decentralized application and you've got specific needs for that, you can create your own custom transaction. So that could be something like, if I was building a decentralized social media site, I might want to create a transaction for creating a post or liking a post, etc. I'm going to walk you through one of those in a minute as well. This is the tech stack. So we have Lisk Commander, so that's our command line interface. So think about it as like the Create React app of the Lisk ecosystem that's going to get you going really quickly and kind of speed up your development. Then the tech stack of the actual application or the blockchain nodes is here as well. So we've got Lisk Framework. That's the framework that your application will sit in. And then you can also add enhanced functionality with our Lisk Elements library. This is something that we use extensively in our own development, but it's also public for anyone to use as well. So cryptography, sending transactions, it's all there. We use it, so it's available for you as well. All of this sits on top of a Node.js runtime. And that's something we've really had at the heart of our vision since day one, is this idea to make blockchain really accessible and use the technologies that developers are already familiar with. And that's something that's really apparent when you look at the dependencies that you need to, the dependencies that you need to install to run the SDK. So we've got Node, Postgres, and then optionally Redis for caching as well. If you're a Node developer and if you're a web developer, these are things you're probably already using day to day. So it's very familiar, no new languages to learn, something that's really easy to get started with. So first of all, to create your own blockchain, I'm going to show you what that will look like. So npm install Lisk. Again, npm, something we use every day as Node developers. And here's the index.js file. This is the only bit of code you would need to write to get your application going. So just pulling in application and the Genesis block, and then we just initialize a new application with that Genesis block. And then it's as simple as just calling the .run method on it. We've added logging and some basic error catching, but that's it. That's only the code that you'd need to kind of get it going. And something that will pop out to you immediately if you are a Node.js developer is that it looks so familiar to Express.js. This is something that's been very much intentional. We want to make it very familiar and intuitive for developers to kind of get going with. So that's your index.js file. Then I just need to create the database and then just run that file. And then we can see here, this is Lisk Explorer. This can be brought in and configured to your SDK. You can actually see that the blockchain would be running. You can also use Commander if you're happier, you want to live in the command line, but this is also available. Something I want to draw your attention to, and this is going to be the next thing that I'm going to show you how to configure, is if you look at the third row, we can see that the blocks are happening in 10-second increments. Now I'm going to show you how you can configure that and make it a 5-second block time. Again, we're just diving back into our index.js file, exactly the same as before, but we've also added this new config object, and we can see there we've just set the config to be 5-second block time. There we go, just restart our blockchain and run it again with the same commands we've used previously, and we can see here in Explorer that our block time is actually now running at a 5-second increments. So we've created a blockchain and we've configured it, changed the block time, and it's all been very minimal code and something that's very familiar. Now we're going to have a go at creating a custom transaction. This is just for the purposes of the demo. It's an illustrative example, but we've got this idea of a cashback transaction. And it's something, if I send a transaction, as well as sending that transaction, I would also receive a 50% of that transaction bonus added to my wallet. So kind of like a super generous credit card cashback. Obviously not something you'd want to implement in real life, but it's just for the purposes to show you how straightforward it is to create these transactions. So here, I've just created a new file. And as you can see, I'm using quite a lot of functionality from Lisk Elements, so cryptography, transfer transactions, etc. And then I've just created a new cashback transaction. It's extending the transfer transaction. As you can see, it's very similar to just a regular transfer, but we've got an extra little bit of logic in here. So all I need to do to kind of create my custom transaction is to apply asset. And here we're just adding that asset into the store. So we're overriding the transfer. And then on the third line, you can see we've got update sender balance after bonus. And this is just our kind of custom business logic for this transaction. And we're using big number. So we're just using big number to make sure that JavaScript is handling those large numbers securely. I know there's been recent improvements to the way that JavaScript processes that, but when we started, this was the most secure way to do it, and it works really well. Yeah, so we're just adding 50% extra to the transaction there, line 3. And then only one little bit more code that we need to add. And just as we add like an apply asset, we've also got to add an undo asset. So it's basically the inverse of the previous transaction. And the reason is just that if for whatever reason your transaction doesn't end up in the main chain, it's not on the chosen chain that goes in, then we need just a way to undo it. So it's as simple as just adding undo and adding apply and then undo. And then we can just import this transaction type back into our old friend, the index.js, and it's just as simple as that. Everything else stays the same, and it's really straightforward. So I could check this again, and again I could use the command line, but we could also check it out in the Explorer. So I do apologize, there's some quite large numbers here, but we can see down at number 1, this account received 100 million tokens from the Genesis account, very nice. And then they sent 1 million tokens to another address. If this had just been a regular transaction, that would have been it, and we'd expect to see 99 million tokens in the balance. But because this was sent with the new custom transaction that we've just shown previously, then we can actually see it's 99.5 million tokens in the balance there at number 3. So the big question, when can you get your hands on this as a developer? So these are the steps that we had to go through. Creating a Lisk SDK monorepo. Again, we chose a monorepo because it's really easy for developers, external developers, to get going. Very simple. That's been live for a good few weeks now. The next stage, we were going to take our SDK, and very much in the spirit of dog fooding and using our own technology, we were going to rewrite Lisk Core, so the main chain technology that's been around for a number of years. We were going to rewrite that using the Alpha SDK. That's been done, and I think on Friday we open sourced that repository, so you can visit it at LiskHQ/core repository. And now we're just finalizing the last bits of QA before we send it to testnet, and then it will go on to mainnet. So this is coming imminently, and it's going to be a really handy tool for developers to just start writing blockchain applications like they would write Node.js applications. So developers in the room, we really want to get you involved with this launch. So please check out our GitHub and also join us on a developer channel on Gitter. We really want to be working closely, getting feedback, and want to see you guys dive in and start working with our SDK. So on that note, I want to say thank you for listening, and really excited to be here at Consensus with Max as well.
Mike, awesome. No, that was awesome. Thank you for walking us through the code and through everything. I want to start on the technical side, though. When you add all that flexibility, you allow people to change block times, you allow people to play with the underlying blockchain. How do you think about the trade-offs that is implementing, not that you're giving them and what they should be looking at when they're making these trade-offs and building their own blockchains?
Yes, obviously there's a trade-off between the frequency of the block time and the amount of transactions that the block time can hold. This is something that we're actively benchmarking as part of our QA, so we're going to be giving more information about that, but they are related, obviously. The faster your block time, there is a trade-off.
I mean, are there any other major trade-offs that you're thinking about when giving people the flexibility and they're creating, like playing with all these toggles, and how that affects the Lisk as a base level blockchain? Like how do you think about all these trade-offs?
So I think by giving all this flexibility, developers will come up with unreasonable blockchains, and that's probably where our documentation just kicks in and our benchmarking, what Rachel mentioned, by just giving example numbers of sensible block times and number of transactions which should fit in so that the latency is not killing the network. And I think it's just about educating the developers. It's a new technology, and they just have to experiment a lot to see what's possible and what not. Interesting fact is here, the more our peer-to-peer layer progresses, the more scalable it probably will become in the future. So we will also constantly have to re-benchmark our own limits.
And so I'll ask a similar question that I asked the ARC team a little bit earlier, but as this goes to testnet and to mainnet, what are you hoping to see? Like when you're looking at benchmarking and use cases, like what are you hoping to see once it's out in the wild of people using it, and how you'll measure the success of that?
So we're working very closely with community members, and we're measuring, one of our kind of key things is how quickly can you onboard, how quickly can you go through this process and bootstrap your own blockchain, add your own custom transactions, so making it very quick and intuitive. And then we'll also be working with quite a number of people at the Lisk Center. There's quite a number of community members who are already kind of building out use cases for that.
Yeah, exactly. So when it means we're going to mainnet with it, it just means that we are using our own SDK to create our own Lisk core. But the SDK is a little bit outside of that. It will be a piece of software just everyone can use for free without any connections to Lisk itself. It's just to give developers this option to really develop their own blockchain. And I really want to see more experimentation in the space, not experimentation with smart contracts. Really blockchain experimentations, like new consensus algorithms, which are maybe researched and developed at universities, or new kinds of like peer-to-peer layers and so on and so forth, so that this ground level technology really can progress.
And so I want to flip it back to the business side, and then I'll open it up to the crowd for questions. But you said that you have the whole team together, you enjoy working face to face. How did you think about making that decision? Because it's very common, especially in this space, to have really distributed remote teams so that anyone can be anywhere. You can go to local meetups, you can build a community in all these destinations, but you went the opposite route and centralized. I'm sorry, full disclosure is also the same. But how did you think about that? And as you try to scale this up and really build this out and build the community, so having that centralized team and not having people spread out around the world?
Yeah, so it's a highly debated topic all the time. Nowadays, developers want to work remote, and we have some flexibility options there, but like we want that the team is together. We don't want to just create like a distributed team all over the world, and then people leave the project, new people join, and every 2 years it's basically a new team. We want to establish like a working culture where people want to stay and just build this future together with us, you know? And it proved time again and again that sitting next to the people is actually very, very efficient and beneficial. Like, it's such a complicated piece of technology. Like I said before, you cannot just call someone in Hong Kong and discuss with them like BFT-related cryptographic topics. You know, you really have to nail it down with them in a meeting room for sometimes several hours to get it right. And it's just like we learned from from other startups in the past which failed because they had communication problems, because also with this size of the team, it just gets like exponentially more difficult, right? And like when you have a project with 10, 20 people, it might be possible, but then at one point you stagnate in your advancements. But when you want to scale your team up to 100 people, you cannot do that fully remote. It's just not working.
Yep. All right, so I'll open it up. Crowd, any questions? Yeah.
Can you speak louder?
You guys got a mic?
Yep. That's one right here.
So I've been noticing a trend. A lot of solutions have been given users the ability to create side chains. And I don't know if that means moving away from smart contracts, but my question basically is, when do you, as a developer, choose to make a smart contract for your application or an app-specific blockchain? Like, what criteria decide which route you take?
So the question is, when do you as a developer decide when to create a sidechain or a chain-based application or a smart contract, or work with a smart contract? I guess it really depends on your use cases. I mean, we've seen with Ethereum, obviously since like CryptoKitties, it's been known just how vulnerable the main chain is to kind of being overloaded. So I think with the chain-based, it just gives you much more flexibility. So you can actually choose your own consensus mechanism. You can customize the whole blockchain, and you're not kind of beholden to how the main chain is. So it would depend on your use case, but I think we are seeing, and I've seen quite a few different projects mention this throughout this conference, that there is kind of a shift towards this kind of chain-based ecosystem as chain-based style. So I don't know if you'd like to add to that,
Yeah,
Max.
sure. I think we have to differentiate between public and private blockchains here. I think for public blockchains and like just public, let's say, applications, we have seen like in the last few years that scalability is a big issue. And I walk around all these conferences and people who currently build on Ethereum saying me, no, in the future it's planned to have our own blockchain. Everyone's saying that. But right now they don't have the tools to actually do that, at least not easily. Some of them are forking than Ethereum and it's a big hassle for them. But if we're talking about private blockchains, well, then a public smart contract platform is no option anyways, because these corporations don't want to be on the same blockchain as other more dubious kind of applications, as well as they don't want to, let's say, held hostage, what Rachel said, on a blockchain with a certain like threshold of scalability, and they're vulnerable. Like just because one crazy application goes viral, their own application is either not usable anymore or the user have to spend a lot of gas to actually use it. So they're like in a very vulnerable position here. I think that's where like private and public blockchains are very beneficial.
Anyone else?
Cool.
Okay.
Cool.
Thanks very much.
Thank you guys.
Cheers.